All right, guys. So I am doing my final exam review for human resource management, and it is fall 2023. All that I'm really doing, to be honest, is taking up last year's exam, and I'm asking and I'm answering questions from last year's exam that relate to the topics that we're going to be covering on this year's final exam. Okay, so let's start. So there's a few. Okay, so here's the topics that we covered. This year, we're only going to be, because the final exam is non-cumulative, we're only going to be talking about topics in the last half, so the last 6 chapters. Okay, I should note that last year's final exam, we used a different textbook and it did not have questions related to chapter 12, so ensuring health and safety in the workplace. There are no old exam questions related to that in this video. If you want an old exam question related to that, you'll have to go to other videos on my channel. And I have multiple talking about that, how to, really what I do there is an accident occurs. Why does the accident occur? Who's responsible? If you're trying to reduce the chances of that accident occurring again, what would you do? Who's responsible for what, right? In that case, it's all about, why did an accident occur? Was it a chance occurrence? Was it an unsafe action? Was it an unsafe condition? Okay. Unsafe actions are the responsibility of employees. Unsafe actions or unsafe conditions are the responsibility of the employer or the organization. And typically, those are the 3 reasons why accidents occur. And those 2, the employees for unsafe actions and the employer for unsafe conditions, are what you're going to be rectifying in that case. Anyways, yeah, take a look at the other videos, look at old exam questions related to that. But for in this video, what we're going to be talking more specifically is going through old questions related to the other chapter topics. Okay, let's start with onboarding. We're going to go through each one of these in order. Okay, orientation and training. So here's 2 multiple choice questions. So what is it? Cal is designing a training program to determine if he should hire a consultant to teach employees about emotional intelligence. Okay, so it's the idea you're hiring a consultant to teach. Which step of the training process is this related to? Is it A, B, C, or D? Okay, Cal is designing a training program. Okay, so the other thing when you're doing this, as you're watching this video, hit pause so I don't jump ahead and give you the answer, give you a chance to think about it in your head, say what the answer is, and then go with it from there. But in this case, it is a needs assessment. Okay, so if you're trying to determine, okay, so the idea of why is it a needs assessment? Okay, you're designing a training program. If you're determining what you should be teaching about, do you need to teach about emotional intelligence? If you're trying to determine the topic or the focus of the training, that is the idea of a needs assessment. You're trying to figure out what needs do the employees have and do they need to be trained on. Number 2, negligent training. Okay, so negligent training occurs when an employer does which of the following? So this is pretty much like a standard definition. Is it A, does not do a needs assessment of the position? No. Fails to develop an employee for a long-term opportunity? No, it's not. It speaks to the idea of training. Does not, what's interesting about this is I have one is this A, B, C, D, and this one's A, B, C, D, E. I must not have copied the E correctly. I apologize for that. Anyways, they didn't even, I kept the right answer though. That's the important one. Does not implement the validation process of the training methods. No. Fails to train employees adequately and employee subsequently harms a third party. Boom. When you're negligent training is all about when you're, as the employer, you're not training employees fully and something happens and it leads to the harm of a third party. Okay, you can get into a lot of trouble. There can be fines, there can be arrests. It's not a good scenario. Okay. All right, move my face down here. So you're a manager at one of the largest lumber yards in British Columbia. You've recently been transferred from working inside the factory to working outside by the shipping yard. One of your main tasks is to manage a team of workers that are responsible for moving wood from the factory to the shipping docks with a forklift. In your first week on the job, you notice that many pieces of wood are dropped, they're damaged, can't use them there, while your team transports them to the shipping dock. Okay, so there's A, B, and C points. Okay, typically I put the little marks associated with each of the letters, so the sub questions below. Here you can see I clearly missed part C, so this one's worth 4 marks, this worth 2 marks, this worth 4 marks. These marks are important because it indicates how much I'm expecting for you to contribute to each question. Okay, so if it's 4 marks, I'm expecting you to contribute quite a bit. If it's 2 marks, it's really just like a 1 sentence, something smaller. Okay. So please describe and differentiate task analysis and performance analysis. So I guess each one would be worth 2 marks, right? That kind of idea. Okay. So here they are. So task analysis is the idea that this is something that you would do with new employees. It's really trying to figure out the way in which the job should be done. Okay. So in this case, if you're moving wood using a forklift, how exactly do you use the forklift to lift the wood? It gives you a better understanding if things are being dropped, like what's the proper technique. Okay, so what's the proper technique to lift it up? Make sure, if you're lifting with your hands, it's always with your knees, don't bend with your back, lift with your legs, that kind of idea. Make sure people are doing it right. Performance analysis is figuring out what people are actually doing. So as people are dropping the wood, what are they doing to drop the wood? What is the exact process that they are doing to drop the wood? Okay. And then you are capturing that in the performance analysis. Task analysis, you're capturing the way in which things should be done. Performance analysis, you're capturing the way in which things are actually done. Okay. Part B, to determine whether training is required, would you perform a performance or a task analysis and why? I actually have a little bit of a typo here. This should actually be both, because you're doing performance analysis to see what the employees are actually doing, but you need to compare it to the task analysis to see what the difference is, to see what the gap is, what the void is. Because if there is no gap and the task analysis matches the performance analysis exactly, then in that case, then no training is required. However, if there's a big discrepancy between task and performance analysis, then you need to train on that gap. Part C is probably my favorite part to this question. It involves a little bit more application. Part B was a good one too, because it had that trick, but part C is my favorite part to this here. So while conducting your analysis, you identified in part B, you notice that some of your employees can't transport wood properly and others are refusing to transport wood properly. Okay, so it's this idea of I can't versus I don't want to. So from a training perspective, what would you propose to do for each of these types of employees? Okay, so for the individuals who cannot, they're willing to but cannot. They want to do it, they're willing to do it. You have to figure out what exactly it is that they don't have, what skills they don't have to be able to transport the wood properly. Perhaps they don't have a forklift license. Perhaps they need to have greater training on the forklift, more confidence with it. Perhaps, maybe they were trained on an old forklift and you have a new forklift, or vice versa. You got to figure out exactly what it is and provide training to those individuals because they want to learn. They just are unable to do it for whatever reason. The refusing people, this is not necessarily a training issue. It's more of a performance management issue. It's more of a disciplinary issue. If they're refusing to transport wood, training them, they're not going to want to learn new things. They're not going to want to listen, so they're not going to change their behavior. It's something that you would have to be more involved with from a do this or else perspective. Okay, so that's that question. Good segue, performance management. So I'm just moving my face all over the place. All right. A manager wishes to give a new employee a pay increase sooner than scheduled. This doesn't sound like performance management. Sounds great. The employee has a great positive attitude and has made other workers more positive and productive. What is the employee receiving an earlier pay increase for? Why is this performance management? It's because we're talking about different forms of performance. Okay, so in class, we talked about 2 types of performance. In fact, only one of these forms of performance are actually listed here. Okay, and that is contextual performance. So we talked about task performance and contextual performance. Task performance is somebody who directly contributes to a team. So think like a hockey player scoring a bunch of goals is a task performance. Contextual performance is how well people are getting along with that. So it's more of like a social side of things. So it would be like the cheerleader for, a team, right? Like that kind of idea. Okay, so in this case, somebody's receiving a pay increase because they have such a great positive attitude and they make everybody else happier to work with. Okay. All right, the second one here is Stephanie is a manager at an accounting firm. She has 4 accountants that report to her. She ranks Eric as the best since he not only completes projects on time, but also generates new clients. Okay. She ranks Todd the worst. Oh, that's not nice, Todd. Since he is constantly late for projects, the 2 other accountants, doesn't matter, they're somewhere in the middle, as they complete projects on time, but do not generate any clients. Okay, switch appraisal technique is Stephanie using. Okay, here's a good one. We talked about 5 different forms of performance appraisal methods. Okay, here they all are. The one that we're referring to in this particular case is alternation ranking. Alternation ranking is used to when you have one trait or characteristic at the top and you're ranking everybody in the organization. So it's you can quickly identify the top performer and the lowest performer based on the alternation ranking. And it appears that Stephanie is using that because she's really highlighting their relative rank to one another. And move my face again. I'm just getting rid of my face. I don't think it's like look at my face. Okay, so you're a director of a team of mechanical engineers. I wrote mechanical engineers because my background is actually mechanical engineering. You probably knew that. One of your tasks is to provide performance appraisals for 3 managers. The manager will then provide performance appraisals for their respective teams. Okay, so it's the idea: director appraise the managers appraise employees. Okay. Probably opposite. Managers probably appraise the employees first, and then the director appraises the managers. Okay, regardless. In this case, A, B, C, you see the marks clearly laid out. A, coaching is an important element of performance management system for directors. Please explain 2 ways in which you could manage coaches. Okay, so in this case, there's 5 different ones that we talked about in class in terms of sub bullets. We kind of grouped the first 3 together in terms of the ideas that it's something that the coach communicates to the employee to be motivating and inspiring and encouraging of their employee. And in this case, the director is encouraging their managers. The last 2 bullets were more in terms of the idea of encouraging this notion of feedback. So encouraging managers, or encouraging, I guess the manager in this case, encouraging the employee to communicate to the manager, or encouraging the manager to communicate to the director. So you're providing open-ended questions to facilitate that conversation. So in total, the first part is the idea of the coaches encouraging and motivating the employee, and then at the same time they're trying to receive feedback back from that particular focal employee. Now, part B, when reviewing the performance appraisals that managers have completed for their respective employees, you notice multiple problems. Please identify and explain 2 performance appraisal problems we talked about in class. Here they are in no particular order. I say identify and explain. And in this case, I would say identifying is worth 1, explaining what it means or defining it is worth a 2nd mark. So you only had to do 2. I list a bunch here. So central tendency, for example, is when you're evaluating somebody. So as the director, do I have any managers? Oh, you're looking at the managers, okay? So let's see. So you, as the director, are looking at how managers have evaluated their employees. And if the manager evaluates everybody, a 3 out of 5, right? That's refers to as a central tendency. And it's just saying that, as a junior manager, you're more likely to group everybody into the same because you're so junior, you're not able to recognize variance in terms of performance, right? Something like that. A strictness and leniency is a problem when the supervisor marks somebody too hard or too strict, or too lenient, meaning too easy. Oftentimes, at least for my TAs in the class, the junior TAs will definitely mark too strict or too lenient. The ones that are trying to avoid complaints from students, they mark too easy, and they assume that if they give everybody an 80, then nobody will complain that they get an 80. However, they will soon learn you are not able to please everybody. If you simply do a bad job at providing feedback, you will always get complaints, because the person that gets an 80 and they only get positive comments will say, hey, I only got positive comments. Why did I not get or 90. Okay. Appraisal bias. I don't know why I started halfway down central tendency. Sorry, I'll go back and do the first two after. Appraisal bias is probably the toughest one we talk about, where it's the tendency to allow individual differences. You can think like, discrimination, so to speak, age, sex, race, to affect appraisal rankings or ratings that these employees might receive. So it's the idea that since I'm a male, I might, as a manager, I might appraise other males and might give them preference for whatever reason, right? That kind of idea. Straightforward and simple. It's a bias, right? It's a problem. Okay. Unclear performance standards is the idea that an appraisal scale is too open to interpretation, or maybe the fact that as the manager, I didn't communicate with my employees how I was going to be evaluating them before I actually evaluated them. Okay, so the employees wouldn't have known what they needed to do in order to achieve a 4 or 5, kind of score, that kind of idea. And the halo effect, I don't know why I always do this. Okay, the halo effect is when one trait impacts another trait. So, for example, if in the supervisor's mind, if someone showing up for work late could impact their performance in some way. So it's the idea, hey, you showed up for work late, you aren't engaged in my job at work, you're gonna get a lower score. So you showed up for work late, that mark or characteristic is going to impact how you communicate with customers. That you showing up for work late is going to affect how you can, I don't know, sell cars or whatever, whatever, that kind of idea. Okay, so it's the inappropriate correlation between two traits which are not related. That's the halo effect. Okay, that was part B. Part C. So part C is the idea. It's really trying to get you to think more applied in terms of like, okay, so you've identified 2 problems in part B here. What would you do to overcome them? And that's what recommendations we make to overcome. It's worth 2 marks. To be honest, it should have been flipped, where the previous question was worth 2 marks and this one's worth 4 marks because it's more applied in thinking, but regardless. So it varies by whatever question you've used as your problem. So for example, if we went with central tendency, okay, a good answer for that, if that was the problem you identified, a good answer for that would be actually training the manager what would be recognized as a low, medium, and high score relating to each factor. Okay, so training the manager could be one way to overcome that error or that issue or that bias. So the same thing for strictness and leniency. It could be to I guess I have a couple of broader examples here. Review the performance standards prior to the appraisal meeting. So this could be the manager reviewing with the employee, okay? But it could also mean the director reviewing with the manager. Hey, this is what I'm expecting you to communicate to your employees. So the director meets with the manager. Hey, here are the performance standards, and then have the manager review with the employee. Here are the performance standards. Do you have any questions? And then feedback that way. Now, the last one, okay, have multiple managers appraise each employee, really speaks to this appraisal bias idea. Okay, so it's the idea that in a perfect world reality, organizations don't have the time or resources to do this. In a perfect world, though, if you had multiple managers or multiple individuals evaluating every employee, okay, and not only were there multiple managers doing this, but there was a diverse board of individuals, a diverse group of individuals. So you'd have different genders, different races, different ages, and they were, that collection would all be evaluating every employee. Hopefully, any biases that would exist within groups of the same, demographic would be eliminated by the others who are also evaluating them. That could be one way to avoid appraisal bias. However, reality that would not happen just because the resources and time commitment would be too great. Would definitely be too great. All right, compensation, my favorite topic. Oh, I did the B, C, and ABC. People hate these ones. All right, so what's the trick here? Employee compensation may encompass which of the following? Overtime pay. Yes. Variable pay. Yes. Regular pay and bonuses. Ooh, this is tricky because it's a regular pay would be yes. Bonuses would be, is that bonuses? Yes, of course. Come on, guys. That's all of them. So the ABC. With regards to compensation, what is used to define job content? Okay. Here is a trickier one. This one probably will fool a lot of you. Okay, so you probably think, well, let's use job content. Again, think about in terms of job compensation and think about in terms of compensation. Okay. Look at the answers. Which of these ideas, right, did we talk about when it comes to compensation? Okay. Job variety, that's a job design thing. Job design, it's a job design thing. Comparable worth, I've never heard of that before, but worth, maybe, I don't know. Behavioral anchors are how to evaluate somebody. No. Compensable factors. So in this case, you just had to really look at which of these concepts are related to compensation, the idea of the job content. Perhaps you get it tied in afterwards, but no, it's just with regards to compensation. This is the only variable or the only answer that's related to compensation there. Excellent. Move the FaceTime. No. You've recently been hired as an HR manager at a startup that creates and sells frozen coffee pods. I actually remember writing this question a couple of years ago. I was inspired by I don't drink coffee, but I was inspired by, there was a startup in the state which is making gourmet high-end coffee, and they were trying to frame it or position or market it to campers. So they make these little pods of like espresso style, intense coffee pods. They freeze them to keep all of the flavor. I don't know. I don't drink coffee. I've never had it, so I don't know whether that's actually good or not. And then you just pour boiling water into it, and apparently it makes these like really delicious gourmet coffees, right? So that, however, because they were so easy to make and you only needed like a pot of boiling hot water, they started going to other places other than just So that's where I heard about this startup, and it was like being heavily funded, and I was like, cool, I'm gonna make a question about that. Anyways, irrelevant. One of your responsibilities is to create a compensation program for the company. You are primarily concerned with maintaining external competitiveness and internal equity. I also remember when this question went on the exam, this was one that people tended to do very poorly on, right? Very poorly on. I also totally forgot to put all of the numbering, the marks associated with each question, A, B, C, D. So that wasn't ideal on my part either. I think I ended up doing 2.5 marks for each of the individual parts. Regardless. Okay, so what is likely to happen if you do not offer competitive packages that are externally competitive? Okay. So if you're not paying people the same amount as what people would be paid for the same job in other organizations, okay? Well, if you are not paying people, if I'm working in job A and another organization has the exact same job and it pays better than it does for me, I'm likely going to go. Yeah, that's what the question's asking. If I'm not being paid competitively, externally competitive, okay? If my company is not being competitive to those other companies, you're likely going to leave because people feel that they're underpaid. Because, well, in fact, they are. Okay, so that makes sense. Question B, what is one way to ensure that you are compensating employees in a manner that is externally competitive? Okay, so how can you make sure how your pay for each job compares to that same job in other organizations? So how do you know whether you're being competitive? Are they being paid more, less, the same amount? How do you know? Well, there's two ways to do about it, but they both involve collecting market data. Okay, market data refers to the idea of the data within the market, right? So the idea. So if I'm an engineer, it's the idea that, okay, what does an average engineer in different organizations make? Okay, so the second bullet is the idea you can purchase this market data. There's a variety of different companies that spend a lot of time and effort collecting market data. You can simply buy from an organizational perspective, you can simply buy that data, okay? And that will give you the answer. Another option is the idea to conduct a salary survey, which is essentially, for me, I create a survey, I send that survey to my competitors and say, hey, how much do you charge for, typically when you do a salary survey, it's for like a very unique job or a niche job, and it's not one of these market data firms don't have it. But regardless, an engineer, you can send it to your competitors, say, hey, how much do you pay your engineers? In good faith. If you give me your data, I will provide you all of the data that we collect, right? So that you have this data as well, right? That kind of idea, quid pro quo kind of idea. In any case, it's all about collecting market data to ensure that you're basing your own compensation off of what is comparable in the market. Because what you could find, okay, you pay your engineer $100,000, and you find that all of your competitors pay their same engineers $110,000. Okay, you learn something. You are not competitive compared to the market. Your employees are likely to leave, okay, if they get an opportunity at the other place, because they'll make 10,000 more for doing the same job. So what do you do then? Well, you have the opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to pay the same amount, or I'm going to pay more than the competitors, right? That kind of idea. Okay, now flipping. Now we're not talking about external anymore. We're talking about internal. Okay, what is likely to happen if your compensation packages are not internally equitable? So in other ways, for an engineer for the same job, okay, I'm one engineer, you're another engineer, and if you're paid quite a bit higher than me, I feel that that is not fair, and I'm going to take off because I feel that I'm not being paid equitably within the organization. Okay. So we say good. And then what should you do to ensure that you achieve internal equity when compensating employees? So in order to make sure that everybody's paid equally or equitably in the organization, not equally is different, because you can still make more money than different people. It depends on the type of work you're contributing to the organization. You conduct a job evaluation. Okay, so job evaluation is essentially, you can think about it in terms of like a survey or a test or an exam that you're taking, and you're evaluating every job. You're not evaluating employees, you're evaluating a job, and you're listing every job in the organization. You're giving them a score based on this exam, if you will. Every job in the organization, so you can see how they score against one another. And that's based on a variety of characteristics that would indicate the relative worth of each job in the organization. So in that case, you might have your CEO gets 100 points, your I want to single out any job, but maybe like your janitor might get 10 points. Okay, so it would not be, you would not be comparing from an internal equity perspective a CEO to a janitor, because they have very different jobs. Okay, however, if you're comparing a mechanical engineer to a mechatronics engineer, they're different jobs, but they're kind of similar, kind of close. And if you find that one of the jobs has like 60 points and the other job has like 30 points, that's like a big difference. So perhaps there's like a little mistake there from an equity perspective when you're paying individuals within those jobs. You would expect from an equity perspective that their point scores would be similar. And if their point scores are similar, so should the amount of pay that you receive for any individuals within those particular jobs. All right, benefits. All right, benefits. So what is the government-sponsored program that provides weekly income benefits to a person who is unable to work through no fault of his or her own? Sounds like almost like a definition. We call it EI. It used to be unemployment insurance, but it was deemed too negative, so we refer to it now as employment insurance, EI. No fault for his or her own. You didn't mess up. There wasn't a just cause termination. EI is also relevant when it comes to maternity or paternity leave. In Canada, you will go on maternity or paternity leave, and you will collect EI for a portion of that time. Okay, Vicky, she's very happy. She has been a contract worker for a construction company and has just been offered full-time. She's no longer on contract. Yes, that's why she's happy. Good girl. She will now receive additional benefits such as vacation pay. What is this compensation? What is this component of employee compensation called? We're talking about this from a benefits perspective. It's a type of benefit. Well, what is the term? What's another term for benefit? Okay. And that is an indirect financial payment. Direct financial payment is You can refer to that as like, that's the cash. That's like your base salary, your merit pay, your incentive pay, your bonuses, things like that. However, a benefit, vacation pay, that is also referred to as an indirect financial payment. You don't get cash, but you get something that is, I don't know, equivalent to cash. There's some cash of value as part of it. Okay, now the short answer question. You are an expert of employee benefits and provide consulting and service for startup organizations. Most of your clients, startups, do not have a lot of cash to pay big salaries. So this is like super common in Canada. You'll have the Kitchener-Waterloo, tech sector companies, when they're competing against people in Silicon Valley. Instead, many of your clients promote their benefits as a method to attract and retain talent. Also true. In the scenarios presented below, identify, define, and explain 2 voluntary employer-sponsored benefits that are most fitting for each client. Cool question. If I remember this question correctly, most people got this pretty easily. There wasn't a major issue with this one. Essentially, the idea with any of these questions, if you're looking at the question, you're trying to put yourself in the shoes of the organization and you're trying to attract, okay? So one of your clients, you're a consultant, and you're trying to help your client attract this particular type of employee, okay? Each part ABC is a different type of employee. Part A is you're trying to attract employees out of the university. So what benefits can you offer your employees to help attract employees out of university? Okay. So when I do this, I shouldn't have put the lines here at first. So here is the standard set of voluntary benefits. It is not an exhaustive list. It's not comprehensive. These are the basic ones we talked about in class. Okay. So of those 6, which ones would you recommend would be most attractive for employees coming out of the university? Okay. And there's not like really a right or wrong answer here. It's just to help you get in the mindset, okay, of an employee coming out of university. So they're likely young, they're likely healthy. Again, not always, but the majority of the time. They're not really thinking about the retirement. They just got out of university. They're just starting to work, but maybe looking to start a family soon, but they don't have any dependents, or at least none is shown in this question. Okay. So in this case, for me, if there's no dependents, you probably aren't concerned with life insurance. You're probably not concerned with retirement benefits. They may, like, sabbaticals are for like rejuvenating, so they're not really stressed out yet. However, they might want to travel, and the sabbatical might give them an opportunity to travel. Young people generally like to travel. When you talk about disability, whether short-term or long-term, maybe, and I should probably even cross those out. Supplementary health and medical insurance is probably something. If you're coming out of university, you probably don't have a lot of money, but you might want to have some benefits and some insurance to help you support and offset some of the costs that you might need on an annual basis related to dental care, vision care, and things of that nature, kids' web plans and things like that. So for me, I think sabbaticals and possibly supplementary health and medical insurance would be the best. I also included disability just in case that, since you're young and since you don't have cash built up, if something were to happen, and you'd want to make sure that you would still continually get paid, right? So again, like the idea is, there's no right or wrong answer, certainly. Well, okay, there's no right answer. There are wrong answers. And as long as you argue which benefits you're providing and why, and it's along the lines of this narrative for the employee, then you're in good shape. Okay. So part B, one of your clients is looking to retain their most experienced workers, and you can assume these workers are in their 60s. Okay. So in my view, they're older, they might be less healthy. When you're in your 60s, physically your body is deteriorating quicker than a 20-year-old. And they might be thinking about retirement. So for me, retirement benefits might be something that's like, top of mind for these guys. Life insurance, if they have kids, if they have a house, if they're single and don't have any, life insurance probably isn't relevant. As you get older, your body's deteriorating, so you probably need glasses, you probably need other type of medical aid, vision care, something like that. So this might be relevant for you. you're probably not concerned with sabbaticals if you're at the end of your career. You probably don't need that time off. A long-term disability, you probably have a savings, so you probably don't need that long-term disability. But short-term, perhaps, I'd probably even cross this off now if I were to do it. I'd focus on retirement life insurance if you have independence and the supplementary health and medical insurance. The last one, this one's a little bit more juicy, a little more interesting. One of your clients has a workforce with the following demographics. This is pretty detailed. Average age 40 years old. They're smokers, single parents, and 3 kids. So this is one that gives you a little bit more content to work with when you're trying to build a narrative around this. The client is also underwater welding business. So the job is somewhat dangerous. So if anybody knows anything about underwater welding, you will know it's dangerous. If you don't know anything about underwater welding, you might have heard of, oh man, what's the submarine that went to visit the Titanic? The Titan. I think it was Titan. Google Titan underwater sub, and you'll see whether it's underwater, doing anything underwater is dangerous or not. Anyway, going back, 40 years old, smoker, single, 3 kids. Okay, so how do you digest this? They're unhealthy, baseline, boom. They're doing dangerous work, boom. You want to protect for your future children because you have 3, and you don't have a spouse that's making money to depend on taking care of the kids. So what do you want? You want life insurance? Yes. You're going to die, right? You're smoking, dangerous work. This is not good. Okay. You also want long-term and short-term disability because again, you're unhealthy. You're an unhealthy individual. You want money to come and to be there for your kids, right? That kind of idea. I'd probably remove sabbaticals. Again, if you had to prioritize them, life insurance, short-term and long-term disability, yes, because things aren't going well for you. You're unhealthy, so you're going to need healthcare of some kind. Remove sabbatical, remove retirement benefits. There's no reference to those at all. Okay? And that's how I would approach it. Okay, so you're identifying each of these benefits and explaining what they are and why they'd be beneficial. Okay? Perfect. Managing employee relations. Let me take a step. Umair resigns from his current employer to pursue further education. What kind of turnover is this an example of? We talked about 2 different types of turnover in class. We talked about voluntary, involuntary. Voluntary turnover is when you choose to leave an organization, and that's exactly what this is. Involuntary turnover is when the organization chooses to end employment with you. Okay. Patty owns a public accounting practice. He collaborates with his oldest accountant, collaborates with his oldest accountant, Sarah, to develop a plan to reduce her hours each year for the next 3 years until she retires. What separation term describes this example? Okay, so this is somebody who is saying, hey, they are approaching retirement and they're trying to, over the next 3 years, they're trying to decrease the amount of hours that they work until they completely phase into their retirement. Okay, so is it retire on call? No. Phased retirement? Yes. It's all about the idea of you're slowly approaching that retirement and you're phasing in the retirement. So this year I'm working 5 days a week. Next year I'm working 4 days a week. Next year, the year after that, I'm working 3 days a week, 2 days a week, and then I retire. Right? That kind of idea. So you can slowly gives the individual more time. But it still gives the organization opportunity to learn from that expertise. Gives the employee a little bit more money. So there's a whole bunch of good reasons associated with phased retirement. All right. So you work at YouTube. Despite the growth of content creators and recent popularity of an HR professor's channel, fierce competition with TikTok, is resulting in YouTube downsizing its workforce. Okay? So in addition to increased pressure from competitors, what are 3 reasons why YouTube may consider to downsize its workforce? So other than increased pressure, we talked about using class. Essentially, it has nothing to do with the additional part above. It's just saying, why do organizations downsize? 1 mark each, right? There's the list. It's not comprehensive, but there's a list that was in the slides. If YouTube were to downsize, what are 2 implications on victims? I think the trick here is to identify that a victim is a person who is lost their job as a result of downsizing. So survivors are the people that keep their job. Victims are the people who lose their job. Okay, so the effect on the individual, it might affect their career prospects if they were a group of the individuals being downsized. The career prospects really from the perspective of that, if you were downsized, it might be, you might experience stigma because people might say, hey, you were downsized because you were inadequate. Also, you could say that if you were downsized and you're working, you work at YouTube, and say 200 people were downsized at the same time. So instead of you just solely trying to look for a job, it's you and 199 competitors, if you will, are now looking for a job, and you all have similar work experience, similar skill set. It's just making it much more challenging. If there was a job opportunity available that was appealing to you, if you and 200 people applying for that job, so it might be more competitive to get the job. Anybody who's ever been downsized impacts your self-esteem, your overall health and well-being. You feel attacked, you feel neglected, you feel that you're worried that you're not going to be able to pay for things. So there's a whole bunch of negative implications on the victims, on you if you were to be downsized. Part C. Unfortunately, YouTube did decide to downsize since it's here. Fortunately, you were spared in the most recent rounds of downsizing. Success. 6 months after the downsizing had occurred, you decided to leave YouTube. Oh, that's sad again. Okay, so it's the idea that YouTube downsized. You survived, but then you're deciding to leave. So what are 3 reasons why you might choose to leave an organization? Again, none of this, the actual question has really nothing to do with anything before this. Everything before it is purely distraction. The question is, what are 3 reasons why you might choose to leave? Okay, here are the ones that are related to, or the reasons that were provided in the textbook, provided on my slides. If I asked you, if I phrased this better, I should have said something. What are 3 reasons why you might have chosen to leave, given the context described in this question? Then you could have said, hey, it's a toxic workplace. I have survivor syndrome. I survived. All my friends left. I created a toxic workplace. Hey, I'm getting a lack of recognition because managers are so busy trying to do other work that they're not recognizing my work. You could say, hey, suboptimal hiring practices because the organization isn't hiring anybody, so I'm being overwhelmed and inundated with additional tasks that go beyond the scope of my initial job. I'm not receiving more money. There's a lot of things you could talk about. Essentially, it's the idea of survivor syndrome. It's the idea that downsizing has occurred, you're taking on additional responsibilities, and that's overwhelming your workload, and you're not being paid more, and it's negatively impacting, you're not enjoying it. And as I mentioned previously, ensuring health and safety in the workplace, there was no questions related to that on last year's final exam, so I will not be able to share any of these questions with you in this video because we didn't have any. If you do want questions on that, you have to go to other videos on my channel, and I certainly have other things related to ensuring health and a safe workplace in the environment. Okay. That is it for today. Hope you found this video helpful, and best of luck studying. Until next time, take care, guys. Good luck.